this moment, we've endured 14 years of X-Men films. Though I really shouldn't say endured. I've enjoyed most of them. 14 years though, that's a long time. A lot of things have happened between now and then. I mean, you probably know a bunch of people who have died in that time period. Sorry for your loss? Anyways, let's take a look at 5 things that you may not know about the series. I should point out some of you probably know some of, if not all, of this information. You know, which is great, but that also probably means you watch as little sport as I do. The X-Men films are riddled with cameos, usually consisting of lesser-known mutants, some of which are inexplicably played by will.i.am. Funnily enough though, 2 huge franchises fans have been begging to cross over, X-Men and Spider-Man, sort of not really crossed over once. As a joke, Bryan Singer had one of his stuntmen, Scott Lever, dress up in a Spider-Man outfit and interrupt a scene. It's actually the same costume he wore for the cover of Spider-Man 262. Anyways, this can be found on the first X-Men DVD as an Easter egg. You can also find it on YouTube, plus the video you are currently watching. Also, Hugh Jackman recently stated that he was set to make an appearance in 2002's Spider-Man, where he was going to have a kind of part where he walked past in the background or did a gag or something, but because they couldn't get hold of that sweet leather suit, this didn't happen. So there you go. Comic book crossover dreams can come true, but not really. Only weird hidden Easter egg ones and scenarios that nearly happened, but didn't. Interestingly, as with most movies, not everyone was the first choice for their roles. Thomas Jane, Owen Wilson, Vince Vaughn, and Jude Law were only some of the names considered for Cyclops before it went to Jim Caviezel. He was though forced to drop out as it conflicted with frequency, thus making way for James Marsden. Natalie Portman also turned down Rogue. Christopher Lee was considered for Magneto, as was David Hemblum, who voiced him in the 90s cartoon. And apparently more bankable actors lobbied for the role of Professor X, but director Bryan Singer insisted on Patrick Stewart, who'd been a fan favorite choice for years. Most notably, the part of Wolverine, you know, the main character from all the X-Men films except for one, was initially offered to Russell Crowe, who turned it down for monetary reasons. Jean-Claude Van Damme, Edward Norton, and Keanu Reeves were also considered for the role, among others. Doug Ray Scott was then famously cast, only to drop out in order to shoot the worst Mission Impossible film, with a then relatively unknown Hugh Jackman stepping in. Recently though, this concept art of Mel Gibson from 1997 appeared online, suggesting that Fox was looking to cast him, with the rumor being that he was too expensive a get. I'm glad this didn't happen though, because you know, he's the worst. At the completion of the X-Men trilogy, a number of X-Men solo projects were said to be in development, a lot of them to focus on origin stories. But because X-Men Wolverine Origins was terrible, the planned Magneto origin film, which could have been totally amazing, was scrapped, and those ideas were worked into X-Men First Class. A Deadpool solo film was also in the works, but again, killed by this film, though I'd say don't count this one out forever. There was also a rumored young X-Men film that would focus on the student characters, but I think the most interesting one is the threequel that Bryan Singer was initially going to make before he left for Superman Returns. Bryan Singer, like many, is not a fan of X-Men The Last Stand. Quoted as saying he realized he'd made a mistake before watching it, during watching it, and after watching it. He recounts that his version would have had Jean Grey's Phoenix traveling the world sorting out problems like breaking mutants out of prisons, and Cyclops having built the Danger Room because he wasn't happy with how the X-Men weren't strong or fast enough to save Jean Grey. Well, I gotta say, that sounds like a better use of both of those characters. To be fair though, I don't hate everything about X-Men 3. You know, it has some good elements, like the casting of Kelsey Grammer as Beast, plus that bit, you know, with the bridge. That was pretty good. I should mention neither of those were director Brett Ratner's ideas, so when are you gonna make another Rush Hour film, idiot? Speaking of X-Men films, which we have been this entire time, all of these movies obviously draw heavily from the comics. X-Men 2 is based on God Loves, Man Kills. Days of Future Past is based on Days of Future Past. The Wolverine is based on a Frank Miller, Chris Claremont run from the early 80s. X-Men 3 is based on the Dark Phoenix saga and another one about a mutant cure. X-Men First Class is based off various comics dealing with the early lives of Eric Lenscher and Charles Xavier. Sort of, loosely. This one's a bit of a stretch. Even X-Men Origins Wolverine is based off something, which is weird, right? Because I felt like they were just making that up as they went along. However, the first X-Men film is the only film that isn't directly based off anything. Sure, elements of it are, but there are zero stories about Magneto making a machine that turns everyone into mutants that ends with a fight on top of the Statue of Liberty. At least I think there isn't. I haven't read all the comics, and I never will. All comic book movies take liberties with the source material, and fair enough. Often these changes are made for various budgetary reasons, and sometimes they're made because much of comics is just nonsense. Here are some changes though that have been made in the X-Men franchise. Wolverine is only 5'3" in the comics, whereas Hugh Jackman is 6'2". Professor X took a bullet to the spine in X-Men First Class, rendering him paraplegic, whilst in the comics an alien named Lucifer dropped a big rock on him. Mystique and Charles Xavier didn't grow up together, they met as enemies. Lady Deathstrike, who features in the second movie, is in fact a cyborg in the comics. Though to be fair, in the film, they never say that she isn't. Cyclops is a badly written character and much cooler in the comics, even though James Marsden does a good job with what he's given. Also, his energy beams, they don't burn or melt things, but just hit something really hard. Also, his body doesn't create the energy beams, but it acts as a conduit for massive amounts of energy that's been transported from another dimension. Which is weird. Look, to be fair, I could go on. And I will! Deadpool! He's supposed to have a mouth. Wolverine and Sabretooth, they aren't brothers. The Juggernaut is magic in the comics, not a mutant, though he's a mutant in the Ultimate Series. The Dark Phoenix isn't some suppressed offshoot of Jean Grey's mind, but an avatar for the Phoenix Force, an entity from space. The original X-Men lineup is different from the original film lineup. And they don't wear leather suits. This guy is also supposed to be somehow this guy. They're not the same. You know what though? I'm gonna stop. Just take my word for it. There are at least, 3 other things that are different. But I really gotta mention this last bonus fact. Danzig, I think that's how you say it, the lead singer of The Misfits, was the fan favorite to play Wolverine and was actually up for the role in the early 90s. Recently, he was asked how he would have played it differently to that of Hugh Jackman, to which he replied, "It wouldn't have been as gay." Wow. Just wow. So I think that's it, everyone. If you'd like to hear more about the X-Men movies, this week's episode of my podcast, The Weekly Planet, is on the best and worst X-Men films. That's out Tuesday on comicbookmovie.com or Monday on iTunes if you are subscribed. Last week's episode on The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and how it's pretty average is linked below. But what's your favorite X-Man or woman character? Is it Wolverine? Because Fox Studios totally thinks that your favorite character is Wolverine. Leave your thoughts below or via my Twitter and Facebook pages, both ending in Mr. Sunday Movies, if you have anything to say about that. Thanks everyone. Take care.